Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Bodacious Rant. I hope everybody's having a fantastic week. You're always joining with us, Bird and Rye, your sexy and handsome hosts. And we've been really on The Last of Us. That's been the most entertaining thing so far this year. There have been some movies here and there that slipped under the radar that are pretty good, but this time we are talking about the first big Marvel movie of the year, which is Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. Yeah, very sci-fi. If I had some little sci-fi music, that's what it'd be doing. But anyways, this one is obviously the technically the third in the Ant-Man series, where we had Ant-Man and the Wasp, and now Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. And of course, we have pretty much everybody coming back: Michelle Pfeiffer, Michael Douglas, Paul Rudd, and Evangeline Lilly, joined by some new people: Catherine Newton, who is from Blockers, and she was in Paranormal Activity 4, I believe. That was definitely one of the worst ones. She's been in a lot of stuff growing up, so that's good that she got in a Marvel movie. And also joined by the fantastic Jonathan Majors. And who else was really? I mean, pretty much Jonathan Majors was the only one that really popped out at me, because he's going to be in Creed 3. He was in Lovecraft Country, and he was in Loki season 1. So I can't wait to see him later in the Marvel Universe. But this one's basically about Ant-Man and the Wasp getting thrown into the quantum realm and now having to navigate that, get themselves out of there, trying to escape the villainous clutches of Kang the Conqueror. And real quick, guys, we are going to be doing a little bit of spoilers. Right now, it's just kind of our non-spoilery thoughts. So before we keep going, please do not forget to give us a like, ring the bell for notifications, and, of course, subscribe. We really do appreciate it, guys. Hopefully, and we love to keep the ranting community growing. So keep that, keep following us for that. I appreciate it. Bern, what did you think of this movie overall?
Well, unfortunately, this movie is a little bit of a mixed bag for me. Like, for everything that I really enjoyed, there was something that I equally disliked, and that's kind of the unfortunate thing. The first two Ant-Man movies are kind of I think they're a little bit underrated in terms of the overall MCU. Like, those two movies are very small in scale, no pun intended. But they really focus in on the characters and the ensemble, and they kind of exist in their own space, and they were very charming movies, and I really did enjoy them, and they were such a great place for Paul Rudd to show his funny acting talents, and whenever he got to be in the larger ensembles, like in Civil War and in Endgame, he really shone there too. But these were very much his movies, and they had that sort of vibe that he sort of carries around as a person and as an actor. And so those were always really just fun movies to watch, sort of inconsequential in terms of the larger scale of the Marvel universe. So they sort of got to do their own thing without having to worry about carrying the weight of the MCU on their shoulders. And with this one, it seemed like they try to take the opposite approach. It seemed like they're definitely using this one to kick off what we're coming into with Phase 5 of the MCU. Introducing the big bad of the next phase with with Kang the Conqueror, and hinting at his variants and stuff. I know we got a little bit of a hint of it at the end of Loki season 1, but this is really his big introduction, since this is a movie, and not a lot of the people see the TV shows, and that is what it is. But this is very much his coming out party. And so in that case, they have to up the stakes, and it felt like the movie didn't really do a good job of meeting up that expectation. It felt like they were, by the end of it, it feels a little bit inconsequential. Certain things happen that by the end of the movie, there isn't really much effect to it, and that's kind of disappointing. If you're gonna introduce the big bad, and if you're gonna kick off this phase, I mean, you got to do it with the bang, and you have to basically lay down the groundwork that why we should be taking this new threat very seriously. And in my opinion, it didn't really do that so well. But in terms of the things I really did like, I did like getting into the Quantumania, seeing all that stuff visually. It was very interesting and a fun place to set the movie in, and I think they really did a good job with that. And for most of the actors, I think they did a pretty good job. I have a couple of nitpicks along those lines, but in terms of performances, I think the actors did a really good job. It just comes down to some of the writing where a lot of the certain motivations fall flat for me. But overall, like I said, it's a lot of good and a lot of bads, and depending on my mood and depending on how things play out, it will definitely like affect the score for this movie. I feel like this one kind of falls along the lines of like things like Iron Man 2 and Age of Ultron, where right now it's a little bit rocky, but potentially later on down the line with more movies in this phase coming out, this one might get stronger by the end of it. But I can only rate what I have now, and for me, it's going to be a 2 out of 5 currently.
That's very fair. A lot of good stuff there, Burn. My whole thought on this is that so far with the latest phase of Marvel post Endgame, we have some great entries, but then we also have some pretty weak ones, especially with names like Multiverse of Madness, Quantumania, No Way Home and stuff. When they start putting out these titles, and there's a lot of anticipation after Endgame. Like you set the bar so high, it's up to Marvel to keep it. And like I said, they have with like Shang-Chi, No Way Home. I hate to say it, I think maybe just those two that are like really great.
I guess Loki season 1 and WandaVision were also very strong too. Like just
Oh, I'm
I guess
thinking more
flat.
movies though. More
Oh,
movies. The
okay.
shows,
Yeah. Well, in
yeah,
terms of the movies, yeah, those are definitely the strongest. And I guess I'd throw in Wakanda Forever in there too.
yeah. Wakanda Forever is still solid. Don't get me wrong on that one. But like movie side of things, not talking about shows. It's their bar is kind of slipping a little bit, and I think we are starting to feel, either there's a lot of disconnect, and I know that's been a complaint for the last couple of years, just because Marvel is they're setting up a lot of good stories. Like we know one of the next Avengers movie is gonna be called Kang Dynasty, so they're trying to they just don't, it doesn't really feel like they're setting the stones very well for the next big bad. This one kind of did with Kang, but it just a lot of the writing I don't think was really there. A good majority of this movie I was like, it's all right. It's kind of it's basically a standard Marvel movie, but it just didn't have the same magic. So I'm gonna give it a 3 out of 5, just because while it was great. I loved Paul Rudd. Like the cast overall was pretty solid. There's no complaints there. But yeah, the writing, and then I just think that it's doing that Marvel thing of trying to be too funny, when there's a lot of serious moments and a very heavy. Like with Quantumania, you should expect, oh my god, the quantum realm is a big deal. That's how we got Endgame. But it just didn't feel that the stakes weren't really there in this one. So that's why I think I was very disappointed by it. But I say we should now we can talk about our very spoiler thoughts on this movie. So for those of you who haven't seen it, definitely check it out. Come on back and see what you think of it. Let us know what you guys thought of it in the comments. But yeah, me and Bernard are just gonna kind of vent out some of the things we really liked, but and also the things that just did not work. So come on back after that. Bern, are you ready for the spoilers?
Yeah, let's shrink down into the quantum realm of spoilers, where we can talk about all these things and no one will get spoiled unless you watch just to this part of the video and disregarded our warnings.
Oh my gosh! But I'm just, for me personally, I think we should start with the negatives because I only have just like one or two things, and that's pretty much it. Is what do you think, or do you want to start with positive stuff?
Yeah, I guess we can soften the blow at the end because I do have a number of things.
Yeah, my first big thing with it, like how I was talking about the humor, was just the MODOK part. How Corey Stoll was brought back from Ant-Man 1, which isn't a huge deep dive, but it was like, oh, you guys decided to bring him back as MODOK, like, or MODOK, however you want to call him. So that's interesting. And overall, his design was very just so weird. Like, he's such a weird character in the comics, just being a giant head with little limbs and stuff. So seeing him on screen, I was like, ooh, this just looks weird. I did like his little cool helmet thing, like his battle suit essentially when he was like in battle mode, but I just did not care for his storyline at all. That he helped Kang build this little quantum empire within the quantum realm, or this level of the quantum realm. And I didn't care the whole death scene that he's like, oh, it's good that I die an Avenger and, I'm your brother. It's like, oh, Jesus Christ. that was just the most cringy thing I think I've seen in Marvel, and it's up there. Like it's shit like that kind of bogs this movie down in almost Eternals bad like level of bad, where I was just like, no, not a fan of this at all. But what else? What kind of got at you, or what did you thought was like, eh?
Well, I guess while we're on the MODOK character, I feel like this is definitely one that it's going to be very hit or miss for people. Either they're going to really enjoy the comedy aspect comes with the character, or like you know, it's not going to work for a lot of people, and that's where the problem lies in with a lot of the elements of the movie that I think you mentioned when it comes down to the humor. With his character, it's like this is like the thing that I think that people can hone in on. It's like Monarch as a character is only about the joke, and you know while it is a very funny joke, I thought it was very funny. Like I really enjoyed that death scene moment, but really that's all the character has to offer in this movie is just being like a weird thing and just like not being more than that, you know, being like a very weird visual that, you know, people find off putting, and that's the humor in it, but that's really it. So it just felt like very surface level. I really wish they could have dug a little deeper into Darren as a character and had a little bit from MODOK to do, because you know they say he's this like you know that he's the hunter. They refer to him as like he's this thing that's been terrorizing the quantum realm, and I didn't really buy that. You know, I just because he's made a joke of so quickly and so often, it removes any of the stakes involved with that character. So I really wish they would have, you know, yes, have the humor elements of it too, like because obviously it's a weird visual. You have to call that out, but it shouldn't just be only about that. So that was sort of that, you know, while that death scene was very funny, it could have been a moment to be both funny and tragic. But you know, I wasn't really sad when the character died. I was just like, oh well, he came and he went, and that was basically it. So. It didn't really, again, it didn't have any lasting effects. It didn't have any stakes, and that's unfortunate, I think.
Yeah, like I said, that's where the weakness of the writing show, especially Catherine Newton's line, like, you know, just don't be a dick. You know, you don't have to be a dick. It's like, what?
Yeah.
Like this is the kind of shit that you guys are pouring out. Like you guys are like 20 years into this stuff. Why are we still having these like it's kind of like amateur hour with the writing where I'm like, you guys, whoever wrote this, like this is who you guys hired this person to write Ant-Man 4 or Ant-Man 3 essentially. Like, come on. I just thought
Yeah.
it was weak sauce. Just
No,
and that's the most disappointing factor.
that was very bad character progression. Like that is not how you have a character arc in a movie when someone tells you, "Hey, don't be like this," and then them just being, "Oh, okay, I won't." It's like there wasn't really growth there, you know.
No, there's no growth, especially for because Corey Stoll was a pretty fucked up person in the first Ant-Man. So how do you turn that into
Hmm.
potentially funny, likable guy? Like, no, I'm sorry, he's not supposed to be a likable dude. He's a bad person. Should have stayed a bad person. But um, the other thing that you pointed out when we saw the movie that I didn't really think about in the moment, but it's just Kang's powers being very inconsistent, like essentially the final scene, or basically
Hmm.
like with it compared to the beginning of the movie versus his final scene, where he's like Darth Vader just lifting up um, uh, Scott and his daughter like no problem, essentially almost breaking them, and then just decimating people, eviscerating them with it like with an easy blast. Caught, and then you see in the flashbacks he's like doing bomb like explosions and stuff by himself, and then
Hmm.
this one it's like dude, you're getting your ass kicked by like three people that could like do miniature, like just go from big to small and just a little tap away. It's like, god damn it! You know, as soon as you pointed that, I was like, oh shit, you're right. He should have been way stronger.
Yeah, like in literally the same scene, we have him eviscerating, you know, these faceless, like, you know, these side characters, you know, the rebels, effectively in the movie, and you know, just boom, 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 they're done. And then when it comes to fighting our main characters, those same laser blasts only just knock them back or just hit them away and stuff. It's like, oh man, like I know there's a certain level of plot armor and a little bit of you know, what's the word that I'm looking for? You know, suspension of disbelief when it comes to, you know, our main heroes and our villains fighting. Like you don't want them to get like, you know, disintegrated like in a millisecond. You know, like that wouldn't be fun for anyone. But at least, you know, be a little bit more consistent on that end. And because usually for me, I don't notice those things. But when I was watching that action sequence at the end of the movie, it was so blatant. I couldn't ignore it.
Yeah, and honestly, I think This could have been like an Infinity War story where the heroes don't win. They get their ass kicked, they get imprisoned or something by Kang, just because it's like, oh shit, like now we're finally starting to feel something with Phase 4, that these heroes are not necessarily invincible, that they can lose and they can, you know, they can be just, they can die or they can just not be superheroes. So I think that's, again, just the writing with this one was a little, it was just too convenient for everything, and I didn't feel like, oh, this is setting up for everything that everybody's talking about. Oh, this kicks off the new version, the new villain and Kang Dynasty and all this stuff. I'm like, this is a very weak kickoff. I'm sorry. This is, instead of it going past the goalpost and everything, it was an onside kick that, got fumbled. Just did not care for it. So
Just a muffed punt, just one of those things like, oh man, it's unfortunate to see, but yeah, like, this is the introduction to the big bad, and I get, the appeal of Kang is, having infinite versions of himself that are all a threat. Our first two instances of seeing this character, they've died, and well, we'll see with this one. I mean, I think he's dead, but it's always left open up into interpretation. Maybe they'll bring him back like Darren at some point. But yeah, I mean, he who remains. It's kind of hard to count that because he wanted to die, so it was kind of like one of those things. It wasn't really a victory for those characters. But here it's like he loses to Ant-Man, which is like, okay, like I can buy that, but it doesn't really do a good job of like setting the stakes for everyone else having to deal with this character. If Ant-Man can beat him in a solo movie, then why wouldn't the Avengers be able to, later on down the line? So it's just one of those things where I hope, we're going to be getting more of him for sure, but I hope by that point they don't henchmanize Kang, since he's supposed to be the big bad. It's like, if we keep seeing him and killing him off like multiple versions of it, it kind of loses its impact after a while, I would think.
yeah, I mean, I really don't know how they're gonna set this up. So we will have to wait till the next Avengers movie, which I think will be out in like a couple years, maybe a few years.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. There are some people saying that the writer who wrote this movie is going to be writing King Dynasty as well. And if that's the case, I'm very worried for it. I mean, not every movie has to be as good as Endgame because that is a high bar. But it's like you would expect Marvel being where they're at, having a way better footing in their storytelling and at least be good on that stuff. Because even the weaker movies before Endgame, they were still pretty solid. Like you said, Ant-Man 1 and 2 were pretty underrated, and I do agree with that. Those are solid movies, even though the second one was a little bit funnier than the first, but it still worked.
Mm-hmm.
But what else, was there any other negatives you had in this movie, or are we ready to uplift the world with some positives?
Not quite yet.
Just no, I still got more. It's like, oh.
No, I don't. Yeah. So one of the frustrating parts for me were the characters. Like I said, I really did like the performances from a lot of the actors here, but what was frustrating to me was writing in some of the characters. I mean, we have Hope Van Dyne, Evangeline Lilly, and Hank, Michael Douglas. It's like they were just sort of there, like they were just sort of along for the ride, and they were so integral in the last two movies, and it felt like this movie they kind of got sidelined. I mean, although they're there from beginning to end, really their only objective is just following Janet around. And for the movie being called Ant-Man and the Wasp, you would think, okay, so Hope and Scott are going to be, the focal points of the movie, and as it stands now, Hope really is sort of a non-factor. She's there for the action sequences, and the only thing she ever does in that time between the action sequences is being like, "Mom, explain everything. Explain, please." It's like, okay, like I really wish they could have done more in the writing for them two in particular. Like, yeah, I know Hank comes in at the end with the big ant army, and that's cool because it serves an action sequence. But in terms of characters, I don't think we learned more about them, and I think they easily could have been removed from the quantum realm aspect of the movie and been just as effective because they really didn't service the plot really at all, and that was a little bit frustrating for me. I don't know if you have any thoughts on them two in particular.
Well, now that you pointed out, now I'm thinking about it. Yeah. I mean, honestly, I hate to say it, you could have that whole plot line of Michelle, like Michelle Pfeiffer's character, basically the Pym family. You could have them just completely gone from the movie, and it would have made a difference, really. Like, the Scott could have done everything himself with his daughter, found the ant army, all this stuff, and that's how they could have done it. And it would have just been Ant-Man Quantumania, and that's the sad part. If you're gonna put Ant-Man and the Wasp in it, you make a good point. She should have been more like Evangeline Lilly's Hope Van Dyne should have been a lot more, should have been a lot more effective, and she really wasn't. She was just like scowling the half the movie or crying half the movie about her mom, and it was just unfortunate. Again, the writing was very weak. It's like it's either the writers are given too much to juggle and they can't do it, or maybe they just like I said, I just really don't know their direction with all of this. So it's not good though, not good.
If you think of like Janet as the Wasp part of the title, then the title works a little bit more, because she was the Wasp, and she was kind of the second lead of the movie, her being the main story focus of that B plot, her and the other two sort of like on that side of the quantum realm, and she's the one that's been here before, she's the one that's had the experience. We get a lot of flashbacks with her and Kang, which were my favorite parts of the movie. I thought them two bouncing off of each other, two really good actors, working and really chewing up the scenery. So I did like that aspect. The one thing with her character does is they do this thing that I find really frustrating from like a story point or like a writing point, where you have a character that has a bunch of information and for some reason doesn't tell the other characters what's going on, and the guys of like protecting them, or it's like, oh no, I can't tell you now, we need to get somewhere safe. It's like you're only making them more in danger by not letting them know what's happening around here. So it's just one of those writings things where it's like, I know they want to withhold information for the mystery, but it comes at the expense of the characters, I think. So when you're pushing the mystery instead of the characters, it just kind of gets annoying to me, at least, where I'm like, just tell them, just tell them what's going on. Well, you're all stuck there. It's like they need to know what's happening if you really want to protect them.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't have too much gripe with that, but I can see the argument with that or that nitpick.
It's a very personal gripe. I will admit that.
No, I mean it's still very fair because it's like, oh, you're in a new place. Someone does know but doesn't want to say everything. It's like they could have they could have told him more about the environment. Like, oh, we don't want to mess with those things. We don't want to do this. They could have revealed more throughout the story just to kind of like be a little bit smarter about it and then talk about the full thing. But this one was just, we just gotta be quiet. Like, just follow me. We'll get out of here. I'll explain everything. And it's like, great, we're gonna wait for majority of the movie to happen before we truly find out what exactly he had to do. And it's pretty obvious, in my opinion, what was going on. But it was just dumb that they set it up that way. And it kind of makes the actors like really have to struggle with that, because if they're trying to portray him this way, it's like it's hard to do that convincingly or to do it well. So. Yeah, so I agree with that.
Yeah, and just my last negative, which will lead into the positives, I guess, is the whole quantum realm, like the whole rebel aspect of it. I felt like it's an interesting idea, having the idea of like there's a bunch of worlds that exist in this quantum realm, and in this world, we have this rebel faction that is trying to push back against Kang, taking over. And I thought that was like, oh, okay, that's pretty interesting. When initial reactions came out to the movie and they described it at, this is Marvel's Star Wars, I was like, but like how and what way? And once I saw the movie, I was like, oh, okay, I see. Like, this is very much like a like a rebel versus empire story with Kang being the empire. So, although like a good idea, I felt like the execution of it was just very surface level. Like we had the rebels and we had the rebel leader who, I'm forgetting her name, but she was really cool. Like on on a visual like aesthetic level, and just like a surface level, like just a rebellion type of thing. But the movie didn't have a lot of time to really focus in on those aspects of it, and it's really just, at the end of the day, it was just sort of window dressing just to have this larger conflict, and instead of really like delving deep into like what Kang has been doing in this quantum realm. I feel like they could have expanded on that and had a little bit more meat to the bone. But as it stood now, it was just sort of like, oh, this is just an excuse to have a big battle at the end of the movie.
Yeah, that's very fair. I didn't really have any gripe with that, but it's just because it was like, oh, you guys got to a certain level of the quantum realm, and now you're way deeper into it than you thought. But even then, it's still just like, how did you guys find Janet? at this other level. Like it does, there's just a little lack of explanation with that stuff, or like kind of diving deeper into the quantum realm than they could have. So, it was, yeah, I get what you mean. It was just, it's all basically just, layers of story that they tried to add to make it a deeper thing. And it's like, you really didn't though. You just added layers for the sake of it. Like it's basically just giant fillers in the way.
Yeah. But on the positive aspect of them, I thought the creature designs were really cool. I mean, no two creatures looked the same. Like, I mean, I have to see the movie again, but they were all very unique and they were all visually interesting. And I thought the designs were really cool, and I can definitely see why. Again, they were getting a lot of those Star Wars comparisons because it felt like this was like a lived-in world, micro world, but like it was very fleshed out in terms of like the things that were living in there and how it seemed like it had its own ecosystem and stuff. So on that whole visual level, I thought the quantum realm was super duper interesting.
I agree with you on that. The visuals behind this movie were very solid. Marvel has not failed on that aspect for the most part. It was just definitely a fun world to be had, and I like kind of Paul Rudd's little happy-go-lucky story in the beginning, his little narration. Even though actually that's another negative within this positive is that we didn't have Michael Pena and his
Oh
crew in this
yeah.
movie. That was another big thing. I really don't know why they weren't in this. I'm very curious to find out why, but they were the best parts of Ant-Man, like the funniest parts, really. So and not that Paul Rudd's not funny. He picked up the slack, especially in the beginning and certain parts. But overall, it was still an enjoyable movie. I still would say it's worth going to the theater for just to get that visual experience to kind of get thrown in it. And also just Jonathan Majors, even with the powers being very inconsistent, his performance as the Conqueror is fantastic, especially
So good.
compared to the He Who Remains, vastly different people. It's awesome. I loved every second he was in for the most part.
Yeah, like he brought like sort of a tortured soul element to this conqueror version of Kang, and his performance was almost like Shakespearean in a way, like in the way like he held himself and the way like he emoted. It was almost like he was playing for like theater, like for a live audience almost, and yeah, like he was again. He's been an incredible performer for anyone who's seen him and Lovecraft Country and the few of the movies that he's done. I mean, we haven't seen Creed 3 yet, but I bet he's amazing in that. Since his previous body of work is so great, and he's such a great get for Marvel, and hopefully if the writing lives up to his performances, then we have a lot of great stuff to look forward to in the future. But as it stands in this movie now, like yeah, he was really carrying the movie on his back. Him and Paul Rudd equally, because Paul Rudd, he's always great. He's fantastic. He's still a golden retriever in human form, so he's really good and he's delightful to have. But yeah, Kang, that he was really the like the emotional and like the heavy core of this movie, and I think in terms writing issues aside, that his performance is a really really strong introduction into the MCU.
Yeah, definitely like a Thanos level threat when he was on screen. So I love that part. But other than that, like I said, it is just an okay movie. I was really hoping for more, so I think that's part of why I mean, honestly, probably should have gone with the two, but I'll stick with three because it was still enjoyable, and I did because of Paul Rudd and all that stuff. But any other positives you want to shout out, or did we cover all the bases?
I mean, yeah, I can definitely see why like people would walk away from this movie, satisfied or having enjoyed it, because it does have the basic elements to make an entertaining movie, and if you're coming into it just to be entertained, then you're definitely gonna walk away entertained. The comedy here for me it hit. There's that's gonna be hit or miss with everybody depending on personal taste, but that for me it did hit. Some of the action sequences were a lot of fun and pretty clever and entertaining. I will say though on that end, it did seem that they did bring some shaky cam like style fight footage back, and that element of the action I didn't really enjoy. But on other aspects, when the camera pulls back and we see these landscapes of battlefields going on, I thought that was really cool. And yeah, I mean, just the actors are, you can tell that all the actors are having a really good time. So writing issues aside, because they're having fun, you kind of have fun with it too. And And yeah, like, so I can definitely see why people will enjoy this movie. Like I said, for me, depending on mood, I can definitely see this movie, fluctuating between a 2 and a 3. But for me right now, it is a 2, because of just, on this aspect alone, it kind of fell flat. But as I mentioned, much like movies with Iron Man 2 and Age of Ultron, if the things down the line are really really good, then this one will kind of be made stronger, I think.
Absolutely. But everyone, let us know in the comments if you saw this movie. What did you think of it? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Could it have been better? Was it fine just the way it was? We'd love to know. But until next time, guys, as always, stay bodacious and keep on ranting for the both of us.
Absolutely, everybody be good, be safe, and as always, we'll catch y'all on the next one.